Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome all to a regularly scheduled City Council meeting. Tonight I have two early announcements. First of all, we've had some technical difficulties this afternoon. Apparently the technicians haven't repaired it, so we're going to be using a handheld microphone for council members. That's the first one. Secondly, it's Drinking Water Week, so I'll stop with that. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. First item is a presentation by Ms. Karen Bazzi, who's our Manager of Emergency Program, and concerns National Emergency Preparedness Week. We have a small presentation for Council and people in the audience.
Thank you. I'm just here to highlight Emergency Preparedness Week, which is the May 1st to 7th this year. It's the first full week of May each year, and it's held across Canada. The purpose of Emergency Preparedness Week is to encourage Canadians to become better prepared for emergencies that may impact their communities and their families. It is actually an event that is coordinated at the federal level by Public Safety Canada in collaboration with provincial emergency management offices, and those offices in turn supported by local governments carrying on various activities in recognition of the event. Now, we can turn on the TV any time of the day and see various disasters and events that occur around the world. The most recent ones being the earthquake in New Zealand, Japan, even the tornadoes that have recently occurred in the United States. But it's very startling to find that actually the majority of Canadians, although they know that planning for an emergency, putting together a plan for their families, establishing a kit is important for their family's safety, the majority of Canadians have not in fact done that. So Emergency Preparedness Week is trying to encourage Canadians to actually put the plans in place that they need to do. Next slide. 3 steps to preparedness is the key message of Emergency Preparedness Week. The first one being aware of the risks that could in fact impact your community, making a plan so you and your family know what to do, and assembling emergency supplies to ensure that your family can be self-sufficient. Now, the consequences of emergencies can often be very similar, but in fact, knowing what those emergencies are can make you be better prepared to put the plans in place to respond to those events. Knowing the risk will help you be in a better place to respond. Step 2, making a plan. If you make a plan to include a number of key elements, you and your family will know in fact what to do, and that goes a long way to actually easing people's level of stress in the aftermath of a major disaster. Some of those plans would include identifying safe exits for your family, from your home, and also from your neighborhood. There is a possibility that an event can impact your neighborhood and not your actual home, so there could be a hazardous chemical leak that requires you to leave your neighborhood when in fact your home is still intact. The second point I have on this slide is establishing a meeting place. Quite often, emergencies don't happen at convenient times. They often happen when our families are separated. So it's critical to have a location to reunite with your family. Third bullet is designate a person to pick up your children if in fact you are unable to do so in the aftermath of a disaster like an earthquake. Next slide. Identifying a local and out-of-province contact is also critical to have a means of communicating with family after a major emergency like an earthquake. The second bullet, knowing the location of utility shutoffs is also very critical to eliminate a fire, for example, from a gas leak in your home. And the last bullet on this slide is retaining copies of very important documents, like health documents and insurance documents that you can recover in a timely manner after a major emergency. Next slide. The third step is assembling sufficient supplies so you and your family can be self-sufficient after a major disaster. Those supplies include having supplies at home, in your work, and your vehicle, with such things like food, water, clothing, and key medication that your family requires. It's important to make sure that those kits are actually customized to meet any personal family needs, including pets. It's also critical to make sure that you store those supplies in a location that's easily accessible in the aftermath of a disaster. It's not appropriate to put your kit in a major crawl space and not be able to actually recover it when you need it. And the last bullet was making sure that you actually rotate and update those supplies so in fact they are actually usable when you do need them. This slide actually depicts 20 years worth of earthquakes in Canada. And the red dots actually indicate earthquakes that are occurring in the Juan de Fuca Plate. The blue dots indicate earthquakes that are occurring in the North American Plate. Approximately 400 earthquakes actually occur each year in a region that actually stretches from the north end of Vancouver Island to Seattle. So many people are surprised to hear that, but in fact we do live in earthquake country. And the earthquake for us in southwestern British Columbia is really a worst case scenario. So we tell the public that if they can prepare for an earthquake, they are very well prepared for other emergencies that may befall them as well. On January 26th of this year, the city participated in the Great British Columbia Shakeout, which was an earthquake drill to prepare the public for how to protect themselves appropriately in the aftermath or during an earthquake. And I'm just going to highlight again that the key appropriate safety action to take during an earthquake is to drop down to the ground, cover your head, ideally getting under a sturdy table if possible, and holding on for at least 60 seconds or until the ground stops shaking. And this safe practice can actually save lives and reduce injuries. So in recognition of Emergency Preparedness Week, we've got a number of activities happening throughout the city. One of them is a disaster pet care and first aid for pets. The second, we're having a session again to educate the public on how to minimize hazards around your home, how to assemble emergency supplies, and how to put together a family plan in our personal, family, and community emergency preparedness session. We've also sending out a news release to local papers to highlight the need for preparedness. We have an ad going in the local papers again to highlight not only emergency preparedness, but also Fire Safety Week in conjunction with Fire Rescue Department. We will have an information display this Saturday at our town hall meeting to again educate the public on emergency preparedness. And we're holding a staff preparedness lunch session, as well as organizing an opportunity for staff to purchase emergency kits through an employee purchase program. So for more information, I'd just like to direct the public and council to our Coquitlam Preparedness website, as well as to the Provincial Emergency Programs website, and also the Public Safety Canada Get Prepared website, which has been prepared for EP Week particularly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. I do want to acknowledge your work, your important work. Last year's devastation in Haiti and this year's devastation in Japan show us all what can happen in an earthquake zone and where we live in one. So thank you so much for all the work you're doing. Seeing no members of council, no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 2 is the second presentation we have this evening. This concerns corporate climate action and energy management. We have an introduction by Ms. Stephanie Warner, who's our Manager, Environmental Services, followed by a presentation by Mr. Trevor Billy, who's our Energy Manager.
Thank you. Tonight we're going to provide a short presentation on the city's efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from its civic facilities and operations. In 2007, along with more than 175 other BC municipalities, the City of Coquitlam signed the Climate Action Charter, committing to a goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2012 and reducing overall corporate emissions by 30% by 2015. To date, the City has implemented close to 40 energy conservation projects, reducing corporate carbon emissions by approximately 900 tons, with an overall annual savings in energy costs of approximately $175,000. I'd like to introduce the City's Corporate Energy Manager, Trevor Billy, who will provide details on the different projects the City currently has underway in its efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and meet its climate action goals.
Good evening. I'm just going to provide an update on our climate action and energy management activities, and the two are closely linked because to do something about climate action means cutting energy consumption. Over 90% of our greenhouse gas emissions at the city come from energy consumption, so to do something for one entails doing something for the other. And the city's actions are guided by the Climate Action Charter. The city made the agreement in 2007 to commit to the charter, and this is our contribution to climate change, and there are two basic components to the charter. The first one is to be carbon neutral by 2012, and fundamentally that just means measuring our emissions in 2012 and every year beyond that, and acquiring offsets to compensate for that. And the second item is to reduce our corporate greenhouse gas emissions by 30% by 2015, and that's compared to a base year of 2005. And we are making progress on that front. We've completed 37 energy conservation projects in the last 2.5 years. Each of those projects is designed to reduce our energy consumption and the greenhouse gas emissions that come along with it. The cumulative benefit of all those projects is a reduction in 898 tons of carbon annually. That's reducing our energy costs by about $175,000 annually, and to put it in a metric that might make more sense, that's equivalent to taking about 225 cars off the road. And I've thrown a lot of numbers around. None of them need to be memorized, but one that might be taken out of the presentation is that we're about 1/3 of the way towards our climate action commitments, which is maybe one number to remember out of all of this. In addition to the metrics, we're actually starting to be recognized by external agencies for starting to be very proactive. BC Hydro recognized us in 2009 as one of their top performing organizations with an energy manager. We are now ranked the number 5 municipality in engagement, and based on our population, we're starting to punch above our weight, and we like it that way. And in addition, we are now a leader in the Workplace Conservation Awareness Pilot. We are one of 5 cities selected for the pilot because we were ready for it, we volunteered for it, and we were prepared to take a leadership role. And as much as we've accomplished a number of things, we still have a lot of work ahead of us. And one of the keys to moving forward is a higher level of executive engagement. And what I mean by that is, in order to keep moving forward, we have to have all of our staff involved in energy conservation. It has to become part of our everyday mindset, and that requires visible direction from everyone to participate in this. This chart is a little bit busy, but I'm going to take the time to explain it because there is a really important point to bring out of it. What this is energy intensity, and essentially this is a measure of the energy efficiency of our city buildings. So what I do is I accumulate all of the energy used in all of our buildings and divide it by the square footage of the buildings, and that gives me a measure of the total energy consumed for every square meter. That is essentially a basic metric of energy efficiency. That is the dark line, the dark blue line on the chart, and over the last 2.5 years, you can see a consistent downward trend. That's good news. That means we're becoming more energy efficient and using less energy for every square meter of building. And it's not an accident. It's because we've done 37 energy conservation projects over that time frame. But in addition to that, we've also expanded and renovated, and every time we renew a building, in addition to fresh paint and fresh design, we also upgrade the systems. So that contributes to it. So that's the bottom line there, is that we're getting more energy efficient. The red line indicates a second part to the equation, and that measures total aggregate energy consumption, which is essentially all the energy used in all our buildings. And it includes things like our expansions. For instance, last year we expanded the Poirier Sports and Leisure Complex. It's much more energy efficient, but it's also much bigger. We just finished expanding the Town Centre Fire Hall. Again, it's more energy efficient, but it's also bigger. So the part of that message is, it's a choppy line, but if you ignore the chops in the line and look at the trend, it's going down as well, but not as much. So we are getting more energy efficient, but the growth is offsetting some of our gains, putting more pressure on the future to do even more. This slide, I'm going to change direction and talk pretty much just about tons of carbon. Our climate action commitments are shown on the left-hand side of the chart in the black line. That is our base year emissions. We've made a 30% commitment to reduce that over a 10-year period. That will get us to the red line. That is our promise made to our citizens. And that's about 2,359 tons. That's not a number anyone needs to memorize. 898 tons is what we've achieved already. In round numbers, about 1/3 of our commitment is behind us. And that's looked like a series of projects. A typical example would be a lighting retrofit, where we've identified lighting that's old and inefficient. We remove it, replace it with new lighting, turn on the switch, and we save energy. So essentially, these are one-time changes. That's what up to this point, it's been characterized. And the question is, how do we get the other 2/3 of the way? Well, we've identified another third. We have 773 tons identified through energy studies that are activities that are on the books that we know how to do, we've identified that can be done, and we're in the progress of starting them now. And these look a little bit different than one-time projects. They're characterized by a change in our daily mindset of using energy. So some of them are behavioral. They're about using only the energy we need, making sure things are turned off or turned down or reduced when we don't need them. But they're also understanding our building systems better so that we can operate them at their maximum efficiency. So they look a little bit different, they're a little bit more complicated, and they're not one-time events. They're essentially a change in mindset that must be permanent, and they take time to engage over time. The two commonalities to both of these, both of these categories is that they're all cost-effective. They take an investment up front to implement them, but they do save money over time. Essentially, we're chasing them primarily on the financial basis, and the GHG emissions are a happy outcome. And there's another 1/3 remaining that we have to identify, and we've seen it available in a campus district energy system, which could save 800 tons. And just to put a framework on that, we're part of a city center campus right here. All it really is a cluster of buildings in close proximity. So we have City Hall, we have City Center Aquatic Center, we have Glen Pine, the Public Service Building, Evergreen Center, and Innovation Place, which are a close cluster of city buildings, each of them with their own individual heating and cooling systems, and they're close enough to be linked with a common system. If we had a centralized system that was common to all of them, it would be more energy efficient from the fact that it could share heating and cooling needs between them. And that is a well-established method to save energy. We're fairly new into this in terms of the investigation, but we've just completed a request for information, which is intended to identify who the potential partners are that might want to work with us, what the basic technologies might look like, and what the next step is going forward. What is a little bit different in our approach to this sector, whereas the other two, we saw the money first and the greenhouse gas emissions were also there. This one, we see the amount of greenhouse gas emissions first, and then we're looking for the financial framework that makes sense to us. This item is about constraining emissions growth, and it's really not about projects at all or kilowatt hours. It's more about policy, and it's specific to us because we are one of the fastest growing cities. We're going to be adding new neighborhoods. We're going to be adding new streetlights, city centers, city halls. This is going to be our future. And our challenge is much greater than a city that's already built out that doesn't have to deal with that. And every time we add something, even if it's energy efficient, it's new, and that's new carbon onto our footprint. And we're going to have to take a look at some of the long-term policy in order to get that to fit in. And these are going to be very brief, but they're just highlights of ideas. And one of them is passive design policy, which is as simple as understanding what the carbon impact of new infrastructure is while it's being designed, and just see how that fits in with our overall plan and whether we can mitigate it at the start. The second one is purchasing. Every time we purchase anything that plugs in or can consume energy, it impacts it, and one item may not make a lot of difference, but if you multiply that by the thousands and thousands of items we have, it makes sense, and we have to have guidelines to make sure we're operating at the most energy efficient possible. And another one, which is a little bit hard to understand perhaps, is city contracts and services, and I don't even understand it all, but some of the contracts that we subcontract end up on our carbon emissions. And I'm going to pick one that I understand that's easy to explain, and it's our garbage contract. We don't collect our own garbage. We subcontract that to a vendor, Smith Wright, who drives their trucks around picking up our garbage. But as they do that, as they're burning the diesel in their trucks, the emissions from that, based on the protocol, actually end up on our carbon footprint. So as we go forward with some of these contracts, as we identify the ones that belong to us in terms of carbon emissions, it's incumbent on both of our parties to work together with our subcontractors to minimize those emissions, to minimize our overall carbon footprint, which we're held responsible for. I'm going to talk about the workplace conservation pilot, which is something very fun we're doing. And what this is about engaging all our staff to understand how they can save energy at work and the actions they should do and why they want to do it, because it's about what we're asking our staff to do to contribute to sustainability at the city. And we, as I said before, we are one of 5 pilots for this program, and we've taken a leadership role. Other organizations have actually pirated ideas from us, and we're happy to be taking the leadership role and making the mistakes because we want to be out front on this one. And it's basically a marketing campaign, which means we have to do it over an extended period of time. We have to change the messages, and basically it's a once-a-month campaign to keep energy conservation at the forefront. We've done kickoff events. We've encouraged employees to sign energy conservation pledges. We've had a suggestion contest to engage the employees. We've done Ugly Sweater Day to encourage people to put on sweaters and getting them used to the idea that the heat might be turned down in the winter. And we've done something called the Christmas Light Exchange, which sounds really simple, but we're actually a very festive city. We actually decorate all our facilities with holiday lights, and it sounds like a small thing, but a lot of them are inefficient. We swapped out over 60 sets this year with energy-efficient ones, and the contribution was equivalent to taking an entire house off the grid, and it was a real project. There's actually a 2-year payback to that, so it's something that made financial sense, as well as something for the environment that was tangible. And it engaged a lot of people because these strings were changed one at a time from various staff who could participate. And we've done a lot of messaging around energy conservation and Earth Hour. And the results are starting to show. We actually had the lowest energy consumption ever in City Hall since 2002. That's almost a 9-year low. And it's not because we're not busy here. There's more people than ever before. There's more networks and servers than ever before. It's because we've taken some energy efficiency directives and we're starting to see the results. And there's actually a new rate structure that came in from BC Hydro January 1st, which does 2 things. It penalizes us for using more energy than a baseline, but it also provides a credit for using less energy than a baseline. At City Hall, we've now got 2 straight months of credits from BC Hydro, so good news on the City Hall front. And this is what it looks like. This is 2.5 years of electricity consumption at City Hall, and a very strong downward trend line. And it's because we've done 10 energy conservation projects here, and none of them particularly exciting or highly visible. I've just listed some of them on the bottom. They're things like lighting controls and bulb retrofits and some changes in mechanical rooms and operational settings. And the last is the workplace conservation in the last few months, which is clearly visible. So what's showing here is a selection of projects which individually are not that visible are accumulating to make a difference, and we're not done. There's still some more projects we can do here. And this just, City Hall happened to be where we did the first energy study, plus it's where half of our staff are, so it was a target for our workplace conservation pilot, but this is applicable right across the board, and we intend to keep spreading this. And I'm going to finish off with an environmental survey. Prior to starting our workplace conservation pilot, we surveyed our staff, and it's basically to understand our current attitudes among staff towards sustainability and what kind of message we need to give to them. And we got a couple of interesting points out of it. And basically, our staff are ready to do more. Somewhere in the range of 90% really want to do more to make our city more sustainable and to green their behavior, but they don't know exactly what to do yet. So a key part of the messaging going forward is to make it really clear what we're asking them to do and how it contributes to green behavior and sustainability, and keep bringing that message to them until it's a permanent take. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from Council? We'll start with Councillor Robinson. The buttons still work to identify. No, they don't. They don't even light up here. Okay. So we'll start with Councillor Robinson, but you'll need the microphone.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It's always very interesting to see what we start out with in terms of goals, and then as we implement things, how they move along. And you talked about, and you sort of acknowledged that, you know, being a third of the way there, I suspect we started with the lowest hanging fruit, the stuff that's sort of easy to implement and to actually see some change fairly quickly. And you talked about some projects for the future. My hunch, though, is that these are less low-hanging, that they're going to be more difficult, more cost-intensive for us. And I'm just sort of, I guess I'm just looking for some confirmation that that's a fair assessment.
It's a fair assessment, but in the second category, which I said was the second third, which was about 773 tons, to make it clear, my screen for a project there is a 10-year payback, so nothing in there is more than 10 years, so nothing in that second third is at all scary, even though it's not quite as beautiful as the stuff we've had so far, but it's all very cost-effective stuff.
Thank you.
And Councillor Robinson, or sorry, Councillor Asmussen.
Thank you for the presentation. Very good, and I think one of the biggest things you've accomplished is with the excitement and the willingness of staff to change attitudes. I think when you look at energy consumption, one of the biggest issues you're dealing with is getting attitude changed, and you've got a big buy-in by the staff, which is I applaud that from them, and the plan that you put together to work for that. The one question, though, is energy intensities and a growing city and our commitments under the carbon reduction from the provincial government. That's going to be really, really hard. Even if we develop the best in energy consumption buildings, we are still going to grow. So isn't that a bit of an unfair calculation to a growing city?
It's a question kind of beyond my depth, but yes, we're definitely one of the cities that is going to be far more challenged than a city that's already built out and where existing infrastructure is there. It's always easy to retrofit something that's already there and make it better than when you're starting from something that's going to be brand new and totally additional to the portfolio. So yes, our challenge will be greater than most.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? No, thank you very much. Okay. Appreciate your help. All your work. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 3 is the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, April 18th. Recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor McDonnell. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4 is the minutes of the public hearing held Tuesday, April 19th. Recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 is the minutes of the regular council meeting held Tuesday, April 19th. Recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor McDonnell, second by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 is an item that was referred to this meeting from the council meeting of April 19th. This concerns second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4200. And this is updating the RT2 townhouse zone. Staff recommendations that council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to zoning amendment bylaw number 4200.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Reamer. Discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Councillor Asmundson is opposed. The motion carries. My neck is...
Item 7 is second, third, and fourth and final readings of citywide official community plan amendment bylaw number 4204 and second and third readings to zoning amendment bylaw number 4205. This pertains to 539 to 557 Foster Avenue. The two recommendations are that council give second, third, and fourth and final reading to the official community plan amendment bylaw number 4204, but the council give second and third readings only to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4205.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor McDonnell is opposed. The motion carries.
Prior to formally introducing item 8, there was a question raised by council at the public hearing, and we have a report before you. What we'd like to ask is that, and there's copies in blue at the back for members of the audience, this concerns follow-up responses to questions raised at the public hearing pertaining to 801 Henderson Avenue. Recommendation is that council receive this clarifying information regarding the proposed zoning amendment bylaw at 801 Henderson Avenue in relation to the following two issues: value of recent residential, single-family and duplex construction, and proposed hours of operation of the car wash facility.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor Nicholson, to receive the answer to a question raised at public hearing. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8 is second and third readings of zoning amendment bylaw 4121, and this pertains to 801 Henderson Avenue. The recommendation from staff is that council give second and third readings to zoning amendment bylaw 4121.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor McDonnell. Any discussion? Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the document that we received on the table. It's not specifically responsive to the question that I asked at the public hearing. There were two pieces to my request. One was for the value of building permits for new construction, and the second was the value of building permits for major renovations. both those, new construction in the neighborhood and major renovation in the neighborhood, were issues that were raised by people either speaking at the public hearing or in communications that they sent to us beforehand. Nonetheless, I find the information provided quite compelling. It's clear that this is a neighborhood that has decided to...
My apologies. I wonder if we could get clarification. This says value of recent residential construction, and I wonder if that incorporates both. I know the building department doesn't necessarily distinguish with the way they report.
Yes, Your Worship, that is correct. The list does include both renovations and new buildings.
Okay, I'll repeat that in case the microphones don't pick it up. The list includes both renovations and new buildings.
That's helpful. But the point remains that seeing the value of work done in this neighborhood, in a fairly restricted neighborhood, I think almost everything within a block of the subject property, one only, I think, is on the other side of another street. People consider this a residential neighborhood. They don't recognize that sometime in the distant past the city may have planned to eventually make it something different. And I can't support this rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I really was very torn about this. I actually went to the neighborhood one evening and I sat on Henderson and watched for quite a long time. I'm not going to be in support of this. This is a very quiet residential area. Even the traffic up on Lougheed and the businesses up on Lougheed, you can't hear too much of that in that particular neighborhood. I would love to support this business expanding their operations, but coming down onto Henderson there, I just can't support that. It's going to be too much of a disruption to a very quiet neighborhood. So I will be voting against this. Thank you.
Thank you. I similarly, I actually went to school just up the road from there, and I remember it is a busy neighborhood. The triangle is busy, but it is residential. Henderson is in that block residential, and that was the challenge I had, was that it really takes the commercial, which only faced Bernatchez a little bit, but mostly faced Lougheed, and it extends that commercial all the way down into the next block at Henderson, and right across the street from there at 220, I think is the address according to this report, is a very significant residential development on a residential street that replaced the Lise house for my piano teacher, and the investment in residential in the neighborhood has been significant. I thank Councillor Nicholson for raising that question. I'm quite deeply torn on this one. So I'm actually leaning toward voting against it. Councillor Sikora is next.
Thank you very much. I think the one thing about it that the development that's proposed for there is certainly going to improve the area. It's going to improve the corner. The gas station is an old gas station. I know that's going to be improved. And a car wash that's there, that's being proposed, is not a noisy car wash that we all think about. I know there was a mention that there's 4 or 5 car washes in Coquitlam. Well, I don't think it's up to this council to regulate how many car washes there's in Coquitlam, or how many restaurants there is in Coquitlam, how many hotels and other businesses. That's a free enterprise kind of deal. So, you know, I myself think that this would be a great addition for the area. I know that when we had the previous planner, Don Buchanan, that was here, matter of fact, the whole area, he suggested from the Best Western up, the whole area to be print shops, dry cleaners, and a few other things. So it wasn't proposed to be a residential area, but however it is, it's a mixture. And that's some of the things that we have to live with, because we created that mixture in there. So to me, I'll be supporting it, but there's no two ways about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none. The motion is second and third reading. All in favor? Opposed? Councillors Lynch, Nicholson, Reid, Robinson, Reamer, Asmundson, and Mayor Stewart are opposed. The motion fails.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 9 is fourth and final reading of the 2011 Annual Tax Rates Bylaw. This is Bylaw number 4210. The recommendation is that Council give consideration of fourth and final reading to 2011 Annual Tax Rates Bylaw number 4210.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Robinson. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. The one thing I'd like to clarify, when I read the Tri-City News, I was a little shocked that there was a comment about me that the policy has been placed for years by a council member around this table, and Councillor Sikora was part of it. Yeah, I was part of the council, but it wasn't my policy. That policy was instilled by the council members, and I don't know what year, because I was here till 1998, from 1972, and under Jim Ton and myself and other council members, certainly the policy was that there was a surplus in a budget, that the council members made a decision with the mayor where the surplus was going to be spent. And most of the time, here's what it was, is that if there was any expenditures from there, that half of it went to a surplus that was put into surplus money, reserve money, and not spent, and half of it went to relieve the taxpayers from the high taxes. So that was for years that went on. When I went to Ottawa, I don't know whether it was under John Kingsbury or under any other mayor that the policy was changed to where any surpluses in the budget is being spent. But matter of fact, and I made some noises about it. So because what happened, that we as council members didn't even know what the surplus was and what it was going to be spent on. It was spent by the department heads. But anyways, now the policy was that I brought it up so many times that the council members said, yeah, we will definitely think that we should discuss the surpluses. Well, hooray. I thought, well, there's something surprising coming aboard. Surprise, surprise. Guess what? The surpluses are here and we're spending it again. And with the casino money that we got coming into this city from $8 million to $12 million a year, we seem to still be hungry for money and still have an appetite of spending. And I noticed that at the end of the year, when the budgets are all in and the taxes are all in, that we're no different than Port Moody and Port Coquitlam. Yet they don't have the $8 or $10 million from the casinos. So I'm wondering what has been happening. So I want to correct that it was not my policy, never was. I voted against it. I'm going to vote against it again. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none. Tax rates bylaw, all in favor? Opposed? Councillor Sikora is opposed, and Councillor Lynch is opposed too. It's one of those years. The motion carries.
Item 10 is DCC bylaw, concerns DCC bylaw approval. The recommendation from staff is that Council give first, second, and third readings to the following DCC bylaws in order to enhance services. The first is the City of Coquitlam Parkland Acquisition Development Cost Charge Reserve Fund Expenditure Bylaw. This is bylaw number 4217. The second is City of Coquitlam Parkland Improvement Development Cost Charge Reserve Fund Expenditure Bylaw 4218. The third is City of Coquitlam Transportation Development Cost Charge Reserve Fund Expenditure Bylaw 4216. And the final is City of Coquitlam Drainage Development Cost Charge Reserve Fund Expenditure Bylaw 4219.
Moved by Councillor Aspenson, seconded by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
The last item on the agenda is that concerns the Metro Vancouver Board in brief. We have our Metro Vancouver Board representatives available to answer questions. The recommendation is to receive the brief for information.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Reamer. I will state as one of the two reps to Metro Vancouver that we at a recent Metro Vancouver Board meeting related to the regional growth strategy submitted a proposed amendment that was ended up not being acted on. We have requested oddly enough, a tape recording of that meeting, and while here at City Council in Coquitlam, all of our meetings are streamed live and recorded for so you could click on it any time in the future. For some reason, Metro Vancouver, we were denied the tape of the public meeting that the public was all at. We simply wanted a tape, and we were denied it. So it was suggested that we had to submit a request under the legislation pertaining to freedom of information in order to get that tape. So I'm going to have to ask, and I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to ask Council for a motion to request of Metro Vancouver, under Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, the tape of a public meeting. Moved by Councillor Sikora, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. Any discussion? All in. Sorry, my apologies. First of all, we have receipt. We'll do receipt first. The clerk was about to fix up this thing later, but the first motion was to receive. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. I'll take the motion from Councillor Sikora, seconded by Councillor Nicholson, to request Freedom of Information, under Freedom of Information, the copy of the tape. All in favor? Opposed? And that carries unanimously. We will send a letter in tomorrow requesting that, which seems ridiculous that we might have to, as a member municipality, go with that legislation. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. That was the last formal item on the agenda, and we have no onward transmittal items this evening.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Robinson to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. As is common, we open the floor to up to 15 minutes of question period on tonight's agenda. Are there any questions? Any questions from the audience? Seeing none. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.